I sat there, staring at him on that bench as if time had stopped. My heart thudded in my chest, louder than the sound of children playing nearby, or the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. He looked up, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. Ethan, the man who'd walked out of my apartment 2 months ago with guilt in his eyes and a golden band on his finger, now looked at me, as though he'd been waiting for me all along. Daniel, he said, my name tumbling from his lips like a confession. Ethan? My voice was steady, but everything inside me was in chaos. You look different. His faint smile didn't reach his eyes. It's been a long couple of months. I hesitated, unsure whether to stay or turn around and leave. But then I remembered the way he'd kissed me, how his touch had ignited something in me I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't walk away. Not this time. I've thought about you, he said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. My head snapped towards him. His eyes were fixed on the lake, but there was a vulnerability in his posture that made my chest ache. You didn't exactly leave room for closure, I said, trying to keep my tone light, though the weight of his words pressed heavily against me. He exhaled a long, weary sigh. I know. I was scared, guilty, confused. Pick any adjective, and it probably fit. He finally looked at me, his dark eyes searching mine. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. About that night. A part of me wanted to demand answers, to make him explain why he'd left, why he'd let me feel like I was nothing more than a fleeting mistake. But another part of me, the part that couldn't deny how much I still wanted him, just waited. What are you doing here, Ethan? I asked, my voice soft. He hesitated, as though weighing his words carefully. I needed space. Time to figure things out. My wife and I, he paused, his throat working as he swallowed. We're separated. My heart skipped a beat. Separated? We've been living apart for a month now, he admitted. Things between us were already broken before I met you. That night just made me see it more clearly. He ran a hand through his dark hair, his frustration evident. I'm not saying I handled it well, I didn't, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I didn't know what to say. This wasn't how I'd imagined seeing him again. I thought he'd avoid me forever, that I'd be left with nothing but memories of a single stolen night. But here he was, laying his heart bare, and I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice trembling. He turned to face me fully, his eyes burning with an intensity that made it hard to hold his gaze. Because I couldn't move on. Because no matter how hard I tried, I kept coming back to you. And I need to know if I'm too late. His words hit me like a tidal wave, and for a moment, all I could do was stare at him. Was he serious? Could I trust him? You hurt me, Ethan, I said finally, my voice breaking. You made me believe there was something real between us, and then you left like it meant nothing. It wasn't nothing, he said quickly, his voice desperate. It meant everything. That's why I had to leave. I was scared of what it meant, scared of how much I wanted you when my life was already falling apart. He reached for my hand, his fingers brushing mine hesitantly. But I'm here now, Daniel. And I'm not running anymore. I looked down at our hands, at the way his thumb gently stroked my knuckles. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Could I take this chance? Could I let myself believe that this time would be different? I don't want to be your escape, I said, my voice trembling. You're not, he said firmly. You're my choice. His words hung in the air between us, heavy with promise. And then, before I could stop myself, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't like the first time, all heat and desperation. This was slow, deliberate, a kiss that spoke of all the words we couldn't say. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in him before. Hope. "Come home with me," he said, his voice low but steady. "Let's figure this out together." For a moment, I hesitated. But then I thought about the way he made me feel, about the way he looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. I nodded, a smile breaking across my face. "Okay." And as we walked away from that park, hand in hand, I knew this was only the beginning. When we reached his car, he turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "Daniel," he said softly, "are you sure? About this? About us?" I didn't answer with words. Instead, I reached up, cupped his face, and pulled him into a kiss. The moment our lips met, it was like a dam breaking. Every ounce of longing, every unspoken word, every suppressed emotion poured out in that kiss. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. We didn't make it far before the need to be alone overwhelmed us. Ethan's apartment was closer, and as we entered, the air between us was electric. The door had barely shut behind us when he turned, pinning me against it. His lips crashed into mine, urgent and hungry. His hands roamed my body, as if memorizing every curve, every inch of me. I gasped against his mouth, and he took the opportunity to deepen the kiss, his tongue teasing mine. "Daniel," he murmured against my lips, his voice rough with desire. "I've dreamed of this. Of you." I didn't let him finish. I tugged at his shirt, my fingers desperate to feel his skin. He helped me, pulling it over his head in one fluid motion before turning his attention to mine. Clothes were shed in a flurry, leaving a trail from the door to his bedroom. When we finally reached his bed, he paused, his eyes raking over me as if I were the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "You're perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. And then he was on me, his body pressing into mine, his lips mapping a path down my neck, my chest, my stomach. Every touch, every kiss was a promise, a declaration that this time was different. This time, he wasn't going anywhere. That night, we made love like the world was ending. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, raw, and unapologetically real. He worshipped me with every touch, every kiss, and I knew then that this wasn't just passion, it was love. Afterward, as we lay tangled in each other's arms, the weight of what we'd just done settled over us. But instead of fear or guilt, there was only a sense of rightness. "I've left her," Ethan said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. I turned to look at him, my heart skipping a beat. "What?" "My wife," he said. "I've already moved out. I told her it was over weeks ago. She deserves someone who can love her completely. And that person isn't me. It's you, Daniel. It's always been you." Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them away. "Ethan, are you sure about this? I don't want you to have any regrets." He cupped my face, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. "The only regret I'd have is letting you go. I've spent too much time living for everyone else, hiding from what I really want. But not anymore. I choose you, Daniel. I'm all in." His words broke something inside me, and I leaned in to kiss him, slow and deliberate. "I choose you too," I whispered against his lips. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. We spent the rest of the night talking, planning, and dreaming about a future together. We talked about his separation, how he'd finally told his wife the truth about their failing marriage, and his feelings for me. It wasn't easy, he admitted, but it was necessary. "She deserves happiness too," he said. And I couldn't give that to her. We talked about moving in together, about building a life where we didn't have to hide or pretend. It felt surreal, like a dream I didn't dare wake from. When the morning light streamed through the curtains, illuminating his face, I knew I'd made the right choice. This wasn't just love, it was freedom, the kind of love that didn't demand apologies or compromises. And as we lay there, his arms wrapped around me, I realized that for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be.
Hey there. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe to help us grow and keep sharing amazing content with you. And feel free to explore our other videos, we've got so much more epicness waiting for you. Thank you for being part of our journey, you're the real MVPs.